question. I mean, I've never asked you this before. Who do you think really killed your uncle?
Well, I think there's overwhelming evidence that the CIA was involved in this murder. I think it's beyond a reasonable doubt at this point. People, who question that, I'll tell you the book, a book that probably distills the millions of documents of evidence, including confessions of people who were involved in the crime and the 60-year cover-up. The best kind of distillation of that is a book called The Unspeakable by Jim Douglas. And I, of course, read probably 100 books on the subject.
Let me ask you one more question.
I recommend that book is the best.
I've said publicly and on the radio that the same people that killed your uncle killed Martin Luther King and killed your father.
Well, in terms of my father's death, in terms of my uncle's death, the evidence is overwhelming that the CIA was involved in the murder and the cover-up. The evidence of the CIA involvement in my father's death is very convincing, but it's circumstantial. We do not have the really strong documentary and testimonial evidence that we have in my uncle, but the best evidence suggests that my father was killed by Eugene Thames Caesar. Sirhan fired his shots. He fired 8 shots, 2 of them toward my father. One of them hit Paul Schrade, who was my father's friend and a UAW leader. The second shot he fired at my father hit the door jamb behind my father and was later removed by the police. Sirhan was then pounced upon by 6 men and bent over the steam table, and his firing arm was directed away from my father. But Rayford Johnson said he had superhuman strength. They could not get the pistol away from him, so he emptied the barrel. He emptied the chamber. He fired 6 other shots, and all of those shots hit people. So we know what happened to all the shots.
Robert, I remember that day like yesterday.
There were 77 eyewitnesses. Sirhan was always in front of my father. My father, the autopsy by Thomas Noguchi shows, was killed by 4 shots that hit him from behind. They were all contact shots. The barrel of the gun was touching his skin or his clothes at the time the trigger was pulled. Those shots were almost certainly fired by the security guard who was holding his elbow at the time and directing him toward the ambush, towards Sirhan's ambush. That man is called Eugene Thames Caesar. He was an intelligence operative who worked at the Lockheed plant and the Boeing plant and had gotten the job as a security guard for my father 3 days earlier. He publicly made statements that he hated the Kennedys. He particularly hated Robert Kennedy because he thought Robert Kennedy was going to turn the country over to the blacks. This was his statement. He died 2 years ago. I was in communication with him at the time, asking to come over to the Philippines, where he fled afterwards. And by the way, he was seen by 12 eyewitnesses with his gun out. He never denied it. He said that he pulled his gun to shoot at Sirhan. When my father fell, he must have known that he was being shot from behind, because he turned around and pulled off Caesar's clip-on tie, and then he fell backwards on top of Caesar. When Caesar got up, he was holding his gun, which was seen, as I say, by a dozen eyewitnesses. But the gun was not confiscated by the LAPD. He later lied about what he did with the gun, and he changed his story repeatedly about why he had his gun out and who he was firing at.
Robert, I want to continue this discussion. We're out of time, but I wanted to continue this discussion again in the near future. And, what we're talking about is part of American history. And keep fighting for America. I understand the differences between you and President Joe Biden. And we'll continue our conversation. Thank you so much for coming on this Sunday morning.
Thanks for having me on.
This is the Cats Roundtable. We'll be right